Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. My name is Mike Richburg. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me will be my fellow co-host and co-founder of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena, Mr. Adam Davies. We're going to turn the tables a little bit. Adam is usually a host on the show, but as many of you know, Adam is quite well-traveled, and is considered and widely renowned as one of our era's leading cryptozoologists. Adam, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you, Mike. I'm going to enjoy listening to questions and giving you the best responses I can, hopefully.
Well, I believe you may be familiar with the subject matter of this evening. I know that I'm a big fan personally. I'm not really shy about admitting that. You and I are good friends, of course. I've had a chance to be in the field together a couple times, and it's really, really a great thrill for me to be able to be in this position this evening.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really enjoyed, obviously, our friendship, and when we were in the field well together, I had a good time. You're very knowledgeable, so I'm sure your questions will be bang on.
Well, I really appreciate you joining forces with us here, and of course you and I and a couple other people decided to give a go of this thing here, and I would like to go ahead and thank the whole team for all they've done to get us to where we are to be able to have this broadcast. I would especially like to thank executive producer Julie Wrench for all she has done. Julie is very much indeed the grease that keeps all the parts moving and the glue that holds everything together. There's always one person behind the scenes that does all those little things you can't even count up. There's so many little things that have to be done, and there's that one person that kind of keeps it all together, and that's Julie in our case. And I just want to say how much we appreciate our executive producer.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, Adam, many of us like to play a little bit of armchair Adam Davies and keep up with you on the television from time to time. Of course, many of us kind of live vicariously through you to some degree in that. I myself am a field investigator of many decades, but of course, whereas I might go a few counties over across the state line every now and then, it's a little bit different. In your case, you have been quite a busy man as far as your travels and everything, and it's certainly a thrill to always be able to catch you on one of those mini broadcasts, and it's certainly anybody that's watched a Monster Quest type TV show or something like that has probably seen you on the television and would recognize you. But I often wonder what was it like in your childhood? What is your background? Where did you come from, Adam? Tell me a little bit about your early stages of your life in your childhood.
Okay, well, when I think back, when I kind of crystallize what made me the way I am, I think there's some things you're born with and some things you inherit, and circumstances you have to react to. Let me be specific. So, in terms of my childhood, I think one of the earliest formative experiences, when I was very, very young, I had a sister that died of neuroblastoma, which was a form of cancer. And it was very, very, very difficult. It was very difficult for me and obviously my parents. And, that was a very hard episode. It lasted a while. It was a very hard episode. But even at that age, what it taught me was that I should maximize out on life because you never know when you're going to go. And I wanted to live hard and make the most of all life's experiences that they could offer me. And I remember thinking that from a very early age, even from that age, around 6. I think the next big formative experience was when I was 8 years old. I was hit by a motorbike that was driving illegally on the, we would call it pavement in Britain, you would call it sidewalk. It was driven by a teenage kid, funny enough, a policeman's son. Obviously, he got into trouble for it, but he broke my leg in several places, and at the time, my poor parents had already suffered the death of one of my sisters. Were told that I may well not walk again, and I was really badly hurt. And what I decided to do with their encouragement was to swim as a rehabilitation. And I became my city champion within a year for my age group, actually, for under 11s. I got a little gold medal as a trophy of it. So the second thing was anything, if I had guts and I had determination, things were not beyond me. I was told that I might well be crippled, and there I was less than a year later as a champion. So I knew I had a lot of determination, and I knew I had guts, and I loved nature. So I used to go out looking for animals, trekking whenever I could, and I just had a real affinity with it. And then when I used to go on childhood holidays to Cornwall, I used to go looking for snakes on the moors, adders, because they were exciting to look for, because they were Britain's only poisonous snake, and I liked the adventure and danger of that. So I did a lot of trekking and understanding nature, did all of those things. And then when I was a teenager, I saw an episode of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. Arthur C. Clarke went to university, same university as me, King's College London, obviously not at the same time. But I saw that, and on that there was Professor Roy McCall from the University of Chicago, who's deceased now. And he was putting a hammock up in Central Park. And he was falling out of it, but he was still going to look for the Mokele Mbembe, the Congo dinosaur. And I like the fact that he was fallible. So unlike some of the heroes you read about in novels or movies, or even some of the eminent explorers, I like the fact that he had guts. He was prepared, but he was prepared. He was fallible, but he was prepared to do things. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go and look for the Mokele Mbembe, the Congo dinosaur. I'm going to explore that legend. I'd read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I'd read Livingstone's account of going up the Congo River and all the danger that entails. And I was ready to test myself. And so I was interested in adventure, testing myself. I did a few things along the way, so I worked towards that. Did various survival courses, with former special forces, things like that. So along the way, but that was really my formative childhood experiences in a nutshell, Mike.
Well, that's a very powerful thing to me. What you're telling me is, and I didn't know this at all, and I thought I knew you fairly well. When you experienced that illness in your childhood, it taught you the value of life in so many words. And after that, you were basically hell-bent to make the best of every day, for lack of better terms. And so when this natural interest just kind of evolved and then enter this dinosaur in the Congo, and I mean, it sounds like the perfect love story to me. I'm sure it was all like Donkey Kong, as they say nowadays.
I had it very much living, to understand my mindset, though, because we haven't ever talked about it. To understand my mindset, if I can expand a little, I was very much about living in the moment. And it's only in the last year or two I've ever considered the possibility that I would live till old age. Because without being dramatic, I never really, I thought I'd take such enormous risks in a lot of the things that I do, that I never thought I'd live to be the age I am now. So I never really cared about things like retirement and stuff like that. So when I was at work doing my day job, I was really not interested in those sort of things, because I thought well, sooner or later I'm going to snuff it doing these things and all the other crazy things I do. So it surprised me. I'm sat here talking to you. I'm pretty lucky, you know.
Against all odds, yes. Well, I can certainly appreciate that myself. Every day does matter, and we should all try to take advantage of every day we're blessed with. And Adam, tell me, you mentioned the Congo. When did your more worldly travels begin? Was that a function of your desire for exploration, or was there already some travel in your lifestyle as you were coming up a young man?
I'd already done a lot of travelling before I went to the Congo. In fact, it wasn't the first cryptozoological expedition I did. I did things locally in Britain when I was younger as a teenager. It was the first international thing I did was looking for the cellular serpent, which is Norway's equivalent of Loch Ness Monster. That was the first international thing I did. The Congo was the second thing I did, and I went there twice. I don't think I'd go there again because I'd done it twice, and I got to where I wanted to go, and it was expensive. But I felt like I needed to do that. And from there, I obviously went to other things. But in answer specifically to answer your question, I'd done a lot of international travel before I embarked on this thing. And that's actually an important step. So it can be very hard if you just, say, lived in North America and you've never really travelled, and then you do an international expedition. I would suggest if you're going to do something international, before you did something international, you should do some travelling outside of the country so you get familiar with different cultures and ideas. It's a big leap to organise an expedition in somewhere which is culturally very different from what you're used to, never having been on it. Anywhere else other than America. It's just not like TV, you know. It's just not. And I'm conscious that a lot of American people, because America's so vast, when I ask people in America, where have you travelled to, their natural instinct is to tell me what states they've been to. Yeah? Well, I've been to Utah, I've been to Arizona, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? If you ask anybody outside of America where they've travelled to, their natural instinct is to tell you what countries they've been to. Yeah? So it's important you do some international travel. It's difficult. It's difficult to do it and it's expensive, but if you're thinking of things outside of America, then that's absolutely what I would do. Take it in stages. It's like, you know, in the same comparison that we make, Mike, is people say, oh, I want to look for Bigfoot in North America. Well, the first thing I say to them is, you know, do you know your local forests really well? Do you know the flora and fauna in your forest? Do you know what the seasonal changes are? Do you know where things breed? How they work? You need to start with the basic groundwork of understanding your own environment before you move on. And there's various stages you work to, yeah.
I can certainly appreciate that. I always tell people that. I mean, if you can't find a deer or a turkey, you probably don't need to be hunting for a Bigfoot, you know. I mean,
absolutely.
You do need to know your surroundings. And knowing your environment like that is very important. Something you touched on there a moment ago, the cultural diversity. Now, having been exposed to a lot of different cultural diversity in your youth like that, do you think that contributed maybe to opening, like expanding your horizons and like you kind of were more of a free thinker and kind of outside the box type person?
Possibly. I mean, what I think what it built was a resilience to suffering. It helps to build a resilience to suffering, in the sense that, you know, I've had a lot of people who've wanted to do expeditions with me who have been very fit, so marathon runners and things like that. You don't have to be very fit to do expeditions with me. You just have to be reasonably fit, not very fit. But they've not done very well when they've been in the field because they don't like getting dirty and filthy for days on end, or very little sleep for days on end, you know. It's all very well when you're running a marathon and finish in 3.5 hours or something, but that's it. You go home and you have a hot bath, and it's a great physical achievement. But if you're doing things like this, really you're doing them for days and days and weeks on end. And having had some international travel, it makes you think, well, actually, I have been in a situation where I've had nothing to eat, I've been really hungry, and I've had to eat something disgusting that is local. Just because I've had. So when you're eating, when you're there, and it's your third or fourth day of eating something disgusting that's local, and I don't mean that horribly. There are some great international foods out there, but sometimes you have to eat foul things. Yeah. And you're not moaning endlessly at me because there's not a McDonald's down the road. It's just the way it is. So I think it builds a resilience. Doing a lot of travel, it's good for you. You learn how to think in different situations. I suppose I have a couple. I've got a good education as well. I was blessed to have a good education. Went to a good school and university afterwards. And so I was always interested in philosophy. So I'm quite comfortable with thinking outside the box. I think the baseline is, none of this really matters. I think there's too much talk about what his opinion is or her opinion is or my opinion is. And with the greatest will in the world, what anybody's opinion is kind of irrelevant. It's about the evidence, not opinions. I don't really care what people's opinions are. I care what they produce.
Well, you said a mouthful then, Adam, and amen on that. I'm right there with you, brother, on that one. Everybody's got an opinion, but that's just all it is an opinion. Unfortunately, we have a lot more opinions in our field of interest than evidence many times, unfortunately. But I want to talk to you a little bit about these different expeditions. We certainly wouldn't have time tonight to go into too much great detail about any one particular expedition, but prior to 2008 and then post-2008, post-2008, you wrote a book in 2014, I believe it was, Man Beast, a personal investigation. Very good book. I've had the pleasure of owning this book, and actually you autographed it and wrote a very lovely note inside for me, and I really appreciate that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Look, the way it is written, we'll get into that in a moment, but it chronicles many of your activities from 2008 on. How about talk to me a little bit about prior to 2008? You talked about Norway, in the Congo. What other kinds of things were you getting into in that time frame?
Well, if we start chronologically, in Norway, I was looking for there's a lake serpent in Norway called the Seljord serpent, and I'd been invited along to go on an expedition by a guy called Jan Ove Sundberg. He's now dead. He was a larger-than-life character. He could be very pleasant, also very moody. He was sort of quite cantankerous at times. I got on with him most of the time. And he'd invited us I brought a British team over and we went to Norway and to look for evidence of this thing. And I should say that I've been looking for unknown species for decades now. There's only a couple of occasions when I've actually seen some. So,
right.
But this was one of them. This was one of them, and I was what I got there was a limnologist report, which were fish experts. They are, and I looked at the limnologist reports of where the concentration of fish sightings was. This is why you're using investigation, yeah? Investigation based on scientific principles is what I'm doing, yeah? I'm not sitting there trying to be at one with the fish or the serpent. I'm using investigation methodology. So I looked at the limnologist reports, then I cross-referenced them with accounts of sightings over a map of the lake. So I had a methodology that I had. I looked at the area where there had been the greatest number of sightings. And I produced, I transposed the greatest number of fish over the greatest number of sightings. And then on those sightings, the times when it was observed in particular areas. And what did I do next? I sat there in a boat for hours and hours and hours doing observational work, yeah? Just letting it flow. I didn't want to create waves or ripples in the water. I just let the boat flow. We had a couple of teams in different areas, and we just rotate them around in the boat, just watching and observing. Because you need to get used to features in the water, which seem obvious as well, but you need to get your eye in, even if you're experienced seaman, which I wasn't. But even those, you need to get your eye in and differentiate between wakes in the water and humps, wishful thinking and what's actually there. So I did that, and eventually that paid off. I did actually see the cellular serpent, much to my surprise, because I wasn't sure whether it existed or not before I went there. But I saw it, and I saw it was black, it was undulating through the water. I saw it, and what was interesting is I saw the barbs on its back, which looked very much like a 17th century woodcut, which I saw later, a production of what the cellular serpent's supposed to look like. So I saw that, and I can say, how can I assert that? How can I assert that, David, without evidence? Well, I have evidence. Because what happened was, as part of the team, we dropped a hydrophone in the water. Now, hydrophones are better than sonar because a hydrophone, at the time, in terms of the technology, it will show you that a large object is moving through the water, but it won't determine what it is. The hydrophones have got better these days, but at the time, that was pretty much how they roll. This is going way back. This is it was 1999, I think, when we're talking about this. So nearly 20 years. But the hydrophone, what that will do is you can produce noise emissions with the hydrophone, and those noise emissions can be analysed. So one of the team, a chap called LA, he made a hydrophone, and we rowed out and dropped it in the water. And he got recordings on the hydrophone. And from that, they were sent to the Marine Research Institute in Bergen, which is the top place of its time. It's the place in terms of listening phase acoustic sounds. And Dr. Soldal there, she sat down with a panel of experts who were in a room. They didn't know the provenance, so they didn't know the origin of the serpent emissions. And she said afterwards that they came to the conclusion, and this was her quote, "I am astonished to say that this was an unknown species," which is pretty amazing. Wow. Now, if this had been the next monster, it would have been world news, because it's a Norway one. It wasn't. But I was amazed that it wasn't world news, but it just shows what the media picks up and doesn't, because it was a remarkable thing. It still is a remarkable thing. And since... Go on.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But all I was going to say is, since we shot some not very great quality video, but we did shoot some video of it, which was enhanced, and you could see the barbs. It was interesting. The last thing I saw was a student, a young girl who'd been out on the lake or near the lake, and had shot a film which was clearer than the one that we'd originally shot, which was very similar to the animal I saw. So, but I can assert that with confidence, Mike, because there's science there to back it up, and very good science. Some of the leading experts in the world. So it's perfectly reasonable for me to assert I saw something at the same time as vocals have been analysed, which have said it's from an unknown species. So there you go. That's it.
Yes, that's very important. Not only do you have the actual physical, visual observation that occurred, you also have collaborating evidence to go along with that in the way of a bioacoustic signature. And
absolutely,
that means a lot. That's a lot different than saying, hey, I saw a such and such. Okay, well, everybody's got a good story, but if you can come away with something tangible like that, that's very, very important.
Yeah, and it's about gathering evidence. And I know you're going to ask me questions about carrying on, good questions about my past. But I just want to I just want to make a tangential link. So, in terms of evidence, if I'm looking at Bigfoot evidence, bottom of the pile for me is stick structures, because they could have been made by anything, yeah?
Right.
Vocalizations I'm more interested in, but they can often be misidentification. Direct eyewitness reports I'm very interested in, and I'll cross-examine them if I meet them. Again, they can be misidentification. Samples, which could be hair, I'm most interested in, because then I can get those genetically analysed if they've got a medulla on them. So that's how I operate in that world. Anyway, I just thought I'd make that point.
No, that's an excellent point. And you're right. Tangibility is a rare thing in our line of work, and anything like that of value certainly would carry a lot of value. When you have a panel of experts from a leading institution like that conclude, this, we feel like this is, an undocumented species, that's pretty strong talk, man. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's all about, discovery. And I know you have a passion for exploration and discovery. And, of course, Norway was just the beginning in that sense of that international exploration. And then, of course, the Congo was afterwards, I believe.
That's right. I went to the Congo on 2 occasions afterwards. The first time I went, I had to leave because there was a civil war going on, and it was just impossible to stay. They were evacuating people out. I got an RPG, which is a rocket launcher, pointed at my head at the airport. If the guy had fired it, he would have killed himself. He obviously didn't know how to use it properly.
Yeah, he killed like 13 people probably, especially you.
And then I went a second time to the Congo, and I actually got to Lake Tele, which is the site of the concentration of many of the reports. But it was an extremely dangerous journey. Colonel Jordan Blatchford Snell, who's one of the greatest living explorers, describes the Lakula swamp, which I crossed, as hell on earth. And it was extremely difficult, not least because there had been a lot of rain, more rain than normal that year. So why does that matter? Well, if it's fairly dry, crossing the swamp's easier, because it's only, have a lot of experience in swamps. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If it's only up to your ankles, it's not too bad. You can tolerate it for days on end. It's a couple of days of doing that. But it wasn't, though. It was up to my waist, and I had a 50-pound plus pack on for days. Yeah. Through this water for days.
Yeah.
That takes
a lot of psychological willpower after a certain point, too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was...
I understand... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. I was going to say, I understand Lake Tele is extremely remote, and it's quite an arduous journey to get there. And it's just a journey is very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the water, there's goodness knows what. As I said, there's snakes, crocodiles, which I ate because I had no choice. I was hungry. Monkeys as well. I sort of hunted to survive there, not because I wanted to. It's just what I ate. And it was very difficult getting through that swamp. At the end of it, there's 3 kilometers right at the end of it, because crossing it is 56k to 56 kilometers of doing this, which is difficult. But there are 2 things. Just before it, the last 3 kilometers is basically roots of like mangrove type trees, and you have to jump from one root to another. And I was exhausted. What you do is you put your dry kit on at night to go to sleep. So you carry a wet kit and a dry kit. You carry a wet kit during the day because you just get wet instantly. Yeah. So you put your wet kit on at night, and you get covered by all these sweat beads. These bees are constantly stinging you. And then you get into your dry kit at night when you find a dry patch of ground. Yeah, because not all of it is completely saturated. There are dry patches, and we found a dry patch just before the entrance to the swamp, because we didn't want to walk on the roots. Because if I'd fallen there, it would have meant that I would have probably, if I'd broken my ankle, I probably would have died. because I would have got the infections are so rife there that they wouldn't have been able to carry me back. It would have taken days and days and days to carry me back to the nearest hospital in Brazzaville. You know, I probably would have died if I'd hurt myself in any serious capacity.
Yeah, I mean, a broken leg would be a death sentence, surely, in that situation.
Oh, yeah. A broken leg would have definitely been a death sentence. Yeah, absolutely. Even a sprained ankle could have caused me a lot of problems there. I just could not afford to get injured, and on the way in or out. So I decide I'm exhausted just before I'm going to hit the mangrove swamp. I'm exhausted. And I decide I'm going to take off my wet kit and then put on my dry kit. And I go down the pathway just away from the tribes people. I was with these Bantu tribes people who walked barefoot through the jungle. They had spears. They still did at the time. I walk over, take my clothes off, and then the next morning I stick my dry kit. The next morning I go to put my wet kit on. And my boxer shorts are missing, and I'm like, oh no, where are they? So I go down the pathway, and there, amidst my boxer shorts, a termite has built her nest. The queen of the termites has built her nest.
No.
So, she was a termite. I had colonies of termites sprang out on my mouldy pants overnight. So.
Oh wow!
So I left them to
it.
So
termites, Civil War, incredible suffering, crossing this mighty swamp. And what was the payoff? Now, you came back from Norway, obviously feeling very convinced that you probably have definitely seen an undocumented species. Now, was that the case in the Congo? Was the reward there?
Well, it was a different type of reward in the sense that when I actually got to Lake Tele, if I tell you, when I got to Lake Tele, I first of all, I just walked into the lake because I was so exhausted. It's a very shallow lake, but it's got one big channel in the middle of it. So I walked into the lake, so exhausted, I just thought, I've got to get here. I was just completely burnt out, and so I just walked in and did that. Then I got on a pirogue. They built some pirogues, which are canoes out of wood. My plan was to sort of scan the area of the lake and look for the tributaries and look for evidence of the creature. I don't remember what it ate and things like that. But I was exhausted and I was covered in cuts all over my body. And I lay in this pirogue just exhausted. I looked up and this carpet of butterflies had landed on me. And I looked up, and there in front of me was a gorilla picking its nose, watching me from the top of the trees. Yeah. So one of the points I made tangentially again about bigfooting is a lot of bigfooters will just look at the ground or just in front of them, but big animals like gorillas and orangs as well, which I've seen in the wild. I'm not going to list all the monkeys and primates I've seen in the wild, etc. Gorillas and orangs are obviously not monkeys, but all the great apes I've seen in the wild and all the other things, they move through the tops of the trees just as comfortably as anything would be on the ground. Yeah. So, if you're thinking about Bigfoot, because a lot of our listeners are Bigfoot people, then my best advice to them is look at the tops of the trees as well. I have seen big gorillas at the top of a tree that they would think is not physically possible for them to scale. So they don't look themselves and think, oh, well, I couldn't scale it, so there's no way a gorilla could. Well, it could. That's it.
It will and does. Yeah. And that's a very interesting point. It is amazing how a large animal like that can get so high up in the treetops in fairly small trees that you think maybe wouldn't support their weight and that type of thing. But that's a very good point. Always look up. Well, I know the Congo was a tough one. Definitely Lake Tele, that was a tough journey. And I know like you say, it was a different kind of reward there. And, of course, just the experience itself was certainly worth it on many levels. Even if you don't get knocked around by a dinosaur, you certainly had quite an experience. And, of course, you went twice.
Yeah, I mean, the first time was fairly abortive because I didn't really get an opportunity to go into the jungle. The second time I did get an opportunity, and it was all about reaching my objective. And it was very difficult to reach my objective. I nearly got stopped along the way, not just because of the environment, but also various people. There were lots of machinations and politics which tried to stop me. I got shot at across the Mbangi River. Near Lake Mfondo, near a town called Mfondo. There were many stories I could tell you about all of that trip, but the reward really was A, I survived, so I get to do all the other adventures, and B, it is, if you get to that environment, it is a very beautiful place, and as I went over it in my old Russian Anatov ancient plain, I looked at the vast swathes of forest below me, and I thought, well, many of them have hardly been traversed, if ever. Thousands of kilometres of jungle have hardly been traversed, if ever. Where I was, there have been a few pygmy tribes, but hardly any people. And there are still places in the world which are like that. It's very difficult to think of them when you're sat at home and you hear sirens outside. But there are still places in the world, and the Congo is a classic example, where there really are swathes of it which are untouched. Yeah.
Yes, and
there are
certainly
another place.
If there is a dinosaur out there walking around somewhere on this planet, that's a good place for him to be hiding.
Well, it's certainly a place that has possibilities. In the sense that I'm not sure it would be a dinosaur, because if you look
I use that term very loosely and almost jokingly, certainly.
No, absolutely. But if you look, let me explain because it's important, I think. If you look back at the biological history of that area, it was savanna grassland, I think, only 10,000 years ago. So I don't think it was a dinosaur. I don't think Makili Lumumba is a missing dinosaur myself. There are some people who are Christian fundamentalists who do believe it might be a dinosaur. I'm not one of them. What I think it possibly is most closely related in some way to a rhino, if I had to guess. Because the way the tribes people described it, I thought, was that they said, "Oh, the male has a horn on its head, but the female is without one." So it's interesting. But it's very difficult to find evidence of it because that whole Lacours area, I think it's roughly the size of Switzerland, with very few people in it, massive swamp, lots of tributaries. Even the pygmies say that the animal is very rare. So I think it will be a massive struggle to find it. I think it's probably, if you find evidence of it, you're going to be just very lucky. I think it's very difficult to get a methodology to pin it down, really.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a needle in the haystack syndrome there to a certain degree. Now, after Congo, where did you focus your attention following that?
Well, much of the next few years was focused on something called the orang pendek in Sumatra, and that's a bipedal primate. Now, that interested me because it went back. Stories about it allegedly went back to Marco Polo's times. I mean, he describes these creatures that which made clicking noises, which lived in the mountains, which were like small, hairy men. And I looked at a lot of the stories about it, and it wasn't like some fanciful notion. It was a real tangible creature with a lot of pedigree, potentially, I thought. So first thing I did was that I decided I'd do a survey of the area. So I went. Sumatra is a big island, so I went across to Sumatra, scanned over lots of different places on the island, and tried to look at the concentration of reports. When the concentration of reports primarily came to this area around, not far from a town called Sungai Penuh, and then you go west of there, and it's all described very openly, so I'm not giving anything away. You go to some villages around Gunung Tuja, and I went and I took a guide up Gunung Tuja, which is a volcano, because this guy claimed to have seen an orang pendek, and I found, and basically as I went up, he told me how he heard. He was a guy, and he moved very softly. Actually, I watched how he moved. He'd walked in and seen two of the orang pendek fighting over some rattan, and he disturbed them, and they both run off, but run off like men, which had freaked him out.
Yeah.
So from that experience, and I found him a convincing witness. I spent a lot of time with him. He showed me the location. We walked about, and I spoke to other witnesses. So after doing a whole survey of the island, I went from the northern bit to the southern bit. I decided I'd concentrate my activities there. And it happened to be that David Martin was there with the Target team, and Jeremy Holden, who's a great photographer and cryptozoologist, and they were there. And I decided I'd concentrate my activities in that area and look for evidence. So that was my focus, really, to try and get some evidence, and to try and get some evidence that can be objectively, scientifically analysed. Yeah. So again, to go back to that point I made earlier on, if we talk about evidence and opinion, I'm interested if you tell me that you saw an orang pendek, but it doesn't really take us anywhere other than a means to an end to gather evidence. Yeah, it doesn't mean whether it's not. People shouldn't get offended in the sense that it's not about belief of story. It doesn't matter whether I believe you or you believe me or you don't. What matters is what can we get out of this that can be analysed objectively, and those results to be repeated by other people. Yeah, so that's what we're after, not beliefs, because there's too much of that worry in the Bigfoot community. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
there really is.
It's all about what. Oh. It's all about that. It shouldn't be. So it's not personal. It's just about gathering evidence. So I mean, there were a couple of things I thought which were interesting in terms of evidence that was brought out about the orang pendek. And the first one was that we found a print which was analysed not just, and I say this very respectfully, by Jeff Meldrum, but also by David Chivers, the primatologist at Cambridge. And both of them came to the conclusion that was from an unknown species. And that made newspapers all around the world, interestingly, which is how I ended up in the TV show.
Very important. Yeah.
Yeah. It made a lot of newspapers. Yeah. All around the world. But the print is one thing, and I get asked a lot about the print. But for me, even more significant was the hair sample that we found. So I'm just going to dwell on that for a minute. And then I just want to talk about and build on that, because I know I want to make sure I get this point in, of all things. So the hair was analysed by a guy called Dr. Hans Brunner from Melbourne University. And Hans Brunner had been important in the Dingo Baby case. It was a film many years ago starring Lindy Chamberlain, starring Meryl Streep playing Lindy Chamberlain. And Lindy Chamberlain baby had been taken by a dingo, and the police didn't believe her, and so she was tried for murder. And Hans Brunner was brought in as the expert witness to testify that she did not, in fact, kill the baby. Yeah, it was a dingo.
I'm familiar with that case. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the hair expert. So what happened was I sent him the sample of the hair, potential orang-pendek hair that we'd found. And say potential because we didn't know. It was just in the locale, and it was on a plant, and it was in a sort of orangey colour. There are no orangutans around anywhere in that area, by the way, and bet as a potential sample. And he got some academic hostility at the time, and it's changed now. There's so much I could say about that. But anyway, he tested the sample. He did a very thorough job. He went through all potential other species of primates it could be. He went to Melbourne Zoo to gather samples. Did a really good job on analysing it. And if you Google, what's the magazine called? The Exploration Society magazine, I think it's called, New Primate Species in Sumatra. You can see the photographs of the hairs that he produced. And it's very clear that the hair there was a distinctive pattern. I wrote about it in an article in the magazine. And it's very clear there's a very distinctive pattern that you can see, which shows that the hairs are from an unknown species. And he was prepared to stick his neck out and say they're from an unknown species. Obviously, the hair samples were destroyed in the process, and DNA was not around at the time, as sophisticated as it is now. But there was somebody who was good enough for the Australian murder department in a criminal trial. But the standard of proof is very, very high, and it goes back to this point: extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And I remember speaking to Henry Hughes, the editor of Nature magazine, and I was doing a TV show in Britain, and it was when the story of Flores Man came out. Do you remember when it first came out? And they was talking about those caves, The Hobbit, yeah,
the Hobbit caves.
Yeah, and they were publishing they were announcing the publication of a scientific paper which showed there was a new species of man available, and it was a massive deal. I mean, since then we've seen several new species come out.
Now, several new papers.
And he said to me, well, with the evidence you've gathered, Adam, if it was a new species of frog, there'd be no problem. But it's this extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and you need to get a really substantive sample, and that was where we were with it. I think that's where we are, and everybody needs to be conscious of that. Again, it's not personal. It's not about I believing it, or even if you've got a really nice photo, you've got to get some sort of tangible genetic material in order for it to be conclusive proof. So
yes,
where does that? And the other thing I mentioned about that was, but that was a very clear example of something where an expert, three experts you've got in different areas have analysed the information I produced and said it's an unknown species. The next thing to do was, I sent I worked out that it didn't have superior hearing, the orang-pendek, for all sorts of reasons. But mainly, one of the most common eyewitness sightings with the orang-pendek is that the witness is about to go to his farmland or her farmland, and on the edge of the farmland they see an orang-pendek eating sugarcane or eating fruit. They startle it and it runs off. That's the most common thing, which indicates to me it's not got superior hearing. For all sorts of reasons, I think Bigfoot has got superior hearing to us, but we haven't got time to do that today. But I don't think the orang-pendek has, and I decided I'd lay a little bit of a trap, and there were four of us creeping through the jungle. We heard a commotion up ahead of us, and I went to the left with my guy Donny. We had our parangs out, and Dave, a colleague of mine, went to the right with Sahar, again, who's passed away now. And Dave and Sahar saw the orang-pendek, and it had been chewing on some rattan. And I picked that rattan up with my gloves and put it in a bag and sent it off to Todd Dissertel because it would have had saliva on it. Now, that was years ago, maybe, a long time ago. Less than 10, but no more than 5. I can't remember. I have to look at my notes. exactly when it was. But now I understand. Then he couldn't pull the DNA off it. He did try to pull the DNA off it, but he couldn't do it. But these days, I'm told that he probably would succeed these days because DNA sequencing techniques have improved, not least in things like contamination. So you still probably need a medulla, but it used to be very difficult to identify new species because of being handled in some way, some of these things. But it's got easier now, anyway. So
yes, certainly certainly, the technology, like you say, is accelerating in our ability to ascertain solid evidence is growing ever closer because of those technological leaps and bounds. Adam, of course, in addition to the Iran Pendak, which you and I both have a great amount of interest in, you've been to so many countries and investigated so many different reported entities, from the Yaren, the Almasty, the Yeti, even India, the Mandi Barung, and so many other places, North America, of course. And I just want to go ahead and mention again to our audience that if they would like to pick up a really nice book, your book, Man Beast, A Personal Investigation by Adam Davies, a very nice forward in here, of course, by Dr. Meldrum, who you had mentioned earlier. That's a very nice touch. And the book is quite well written. I wanted to point out that the book is not really written from here's a guide to certain cryptids or anything like that. It's more about your experiences. And I really found that very captivating, quite frankly.
Thank you, man. Well, it's really it's deliberately written like that. So a lot of in my first book and in my second book, what I want to do is capture the moment, because I read accounts by previous explorers, and they'll go, oh, day 56. I looked at the leaf as it hovered in the moonlight, and I caught a dewdrop glibly falling from its delicate breast, or something like that, some fancy prose. And I was thinking, well, you know what? If it's day 56 and I'm in the jungle or I'm in the dirt, I'm tired. Yeah, I want to laugh. I'll chat to you. I wanted it to be a real account of how I thought and felt at the time. And I've got very soon. I've got a video coming out about my life story. So Russ has made that film about my life story, and I think that's coming out fairly soon. I need to catch up and say when, but in the next couple of months, I would imagine that will be produced. And so in that, I will have not just a lot of more detailed stories about what I did, but also a lot of photographs and evidence that I haven't previously produced. It took a while to dig all of these things out, from both my childhood to my expeditions, all of this, and also more on my psychology and what makes me tick. So if people are interested in that, then the life story video will be a good one, I hope. Yeah, I'm pretty confident it will be.
Yes, that sounds fantastic, Adam. I'm very much looking forward to that. And please do keep us apprised of any updates you have regarding that, as far as a date we might could start looking for that to come out, because I'm sure many of us would like to check that out for sure. That sounds very, very interesting. Adam, quickly, we only have a few minutes before we go, but I know you've been very busy in the field this year. I know that you were in the field with me at one point, along with some other people, including Julie, who could not make it, but was there with us in spirit. Melissa Winadare was there, Bigfoot Chick Adventures, a few other folks. I know that not only that, you've just returned now from an undisclosed location in North America, where You're probably not really able to talk too much about that yet, but that was very interesting for you. And I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot about that very soon. Is there anything else coming up as far as any places you might be presenting or appearing this year that you know of, any conferences or anything like that?
Well, in terms of, all I can say about the last expedition I was on is yes, it proved to be very interesting. And that's all I can say right now. But it did prove to be very interesting. Put it like this, I'm pleased. But we'll see what happens, yeah? So watch that space. So far I'm down to speak at the IBC in September. I only tend to do a couple of conferences a year. I just can't afford the time. It's not it's me thing. You know, if I don't work, I don't get paid. So I can't afford to do lots of conferences. It's as simple as that. And maybe huh? What'd you say?
I said I could certainly understand that. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things I'd like to do. Not that I'm getting asked to present at any conferences or anything like that, but I can feel you there for sure.
Yeah. So far I'm down. The only one I'm down to do is the IBC. I mean, I think there might be something in Oklahoma as well. I'd have to check that and see if that's being pursued. But nothing else so far. And that's fine. I'll do more field research. If something else comes up, I'll let you know. But right now, that's the only one. And you know, I'm going to carry on doing my field research. The way this year's gone so far, I've been very pleased with. I mean, it's only March, and I've already done and accomplished a lot of things. But I still have more adventures to do this year. So I really sort of cracked in pretty hard this winter. I wanted to get quite a lot done. I had a lot of objectives to achieve.
Well, you've been very busy, and I didn't even mention you, of course, have something going on in the Southwest that you'll be sharing publicly later when it's appropriate. Adam, go ahead.
All I was going to say is, yeah, I've had a lot. And what I've been pleased about is that some of my adventures have achieved some interesting results, let's just say. So the next step is to get those things analysed.
Yes, well, I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about that also. The little bit I do know was very, very much piqued my interest. Adam, of course, you're also going to be joining us here on a regular basis. Of course, you're co-founder and a primary host here at Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena, as well as our lead investigator. So folks that tune in will be getting a pretty steady dose of you in the near future.
Absolutely. So next week we've got Michael Huntington, haven't we, on the show? Is that right?
That is correct. Next week it's Brink of Disclosure with Michael Huntington. And I hope everyone will join in next week.